Hey, Inspired Moneymaker. In this episode, we're talking Hawaiian music, the business of being a musician. And for the first time, we've got guitar playing. Episode 261 features Makana, Hawaiian Slack Key Guitar player, singer, composer.
I'm at a place now in my life where it's like what's going on inside is so much more rewarding for me. The thought process, the creative process, imagination, like the potential of art to move people, like that power of like an idea, how it can just boom, how a song can just completely shatter someone or bring them to life. These are magical powers. And so using that as my currency rather than this idea that I just need to play the game like everyone else and invest and save and put it into this and let that, build. And I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in that. So that's what I mean by my secret power is when you don't have the same goal that everyone else has, you're not subject to the same rules.
I'm Andy Wong, host of the Inspired Money podcast, where we share positive perspectives on money so we can make a bigger impact in our communities and in the world. This episode is brought to you by my company, Runnymede Capital Management. Individuals, families, and business owners hire us to manage their investments through full market cycles. As of this recording, there's a lot of uncertainty about interest rates, stocks, and the economy. If you want insights into our market outlook, subscribe to our email that goes out every 2 weeks by going to inspiredmoney.fm/newsletter. Let me know if I can be of help to you and your finances. I love this episode because it combines my passion for Hawaiian music, acoustic guitar, and money. Meet my friend Makana. I first saw him perform over 25 years ago in Pearl City on the island of Oahu. I've since seen him perform on Maui, Kauai, and in New York City. In 2011, Makana turned a gig at an Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation dinner in Honolulu, attended by then-President Barack Obama, and the leaders of 18 other nations into a political protest. He performed his song, We Are the Many, a protest song Rolling Stone magazine went on to call the anthem of the Occupy movement. He has garnered praise from guitar luminaries including Kirk Hammett of Metallica and Spanish flamenco master Pepe Romero. Makana has toured with or opened for acts such as Jason Mraz, Santana, Elvis Costello, Sting, No Doubt, Jack Johnson, John Legend, and more. In this episode, you'll learn about Hawaiian Slack Key Guitar and its different styles, the multiple revenue streams of musicians must be entrepreneurs, and stay tuned to the end to hear why Makana says wanting things that others do not want makes him wealthy. Now let's get inspired with Makana. Makana, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
I totally forgot what this was called.
You're not supposed to tell me that.
Sweet.
So let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Well, in my early childhood, we didn't have money, so I don't really have many memories. My dad worked for Motorola as first an engineer and then a salesperson, and we were a single income family. And I know there was always stress around money. We didn't really have allowances until much later, like in teen years, but we always had everything we needed. So I think my only early childhood memory of money is scrounging around to always have a few, I think it was a quarter to buy, it wasn't shave ice. It was like a red cup ice. Like we would walk home from Palisades Elementary and there's a little food truck and they sold this little Dixie cup with like red frozen sugar water. And like you had to have one, you couldn't be that one kid who didn't. So like it was, I think, a quarter at the time. So that's my earliest childhood memory, is trying to scrounge quarters.
You started playing guitar at an early age. How early did playing music feel like it could become something that you could do and make money and sort of help deal with not having a lot of money as a kid?
Yeah. The thought didn't occur to me really at all until I graduated, although I was earning income by the time I was 14. And then at age 15 through, I guess, 17 or 18, I was doing like 4 or 5 nights a week and helping my parents pay rent. So then when I graduated, I realized like I already had a job. Like I hadn't really had the thought. And I moved out of my parents' house and moved in with one of my students and was paying rent. It wasn't much, but I was like, by that time I was able to pay my bills. And so it was never really a thought like, oh, it was just like over a little period of time, I started to realize like this is my life. It wasn't so much some abstract thing, you know, it just was so natural. It just evolved so naturally and organically that suddenly it's what I was doing.
What came first, guitar or Hawaiian Slack Key Guitar?
Hawaiian Slack Key Guitar came first. I didn't even know how to tune into standard till years later.
Can you talk about some of the teachers that you've had over the years? Because I think in Hawaiian Slack Key, it's so important looking at one's lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you learn from? And what are your Slack Key roots?
Sure. Well, I was very blessed to learn from directly from 3 teachers. The first was Bobby Madero Jr. Bobby was a protege of Raymond Kane, Kaleo Aloha Poina Oleo Hele Manu Kane of Nanakuli. And Bobby taught me Raymond's style. And then I also learned directly from Raymond as well in his home in Nanakuli. And learning that style, beginning with that style was awesome because it was what we call a nahe nahe style. It's very slow and gentle and it's not too fancy, but it's really a beautiful way of playing slack key, which is of course a style that is special to Hawaii, ki ho'alu. And after I learned from them, I became the last protege of Sonny Chillingworth. So for those unfamiliar with these names, Sonny and Raymond are recognized. They've both passed, but they're masters of the art form. And it's a rare art form. There are very few of us even today that play it. And it originated back in the 1800s with the arrival of the guitar in the hands of the vaqueros who came to Hawaii at the request of Kauike Auuli Kamehameha III to help deal with the cattle, the growing cattle population. So these cowboys from Mexico brought their guitars, and the Hawaiians adapted the guitar by changing the tunings and slacking them in order to create chords. And in those chords, they could then play in a self-accompaniment style.
Since you're holding your guitar,
Yeah.
Can you give us a little sample of Raymond Kane's style of slack key?
Sure.
Back in the 90s, I used to drive out to Nanakuli and get some lessons with Uncle Raymond.
Yeah, Raymond was such a character, and his door was always open, and I mean, just such a humble legend, you know? This is his song, Punahele. punahele.
How does that music make you feel?
Relaxed. I always have people tell me, God, I always fall asleep to your music. And when I was younger, I'd be like mad. And then I realized, like, oh, this is a compliment. A lot of people have trouble sleeping these days. But this music for me is my first language. So it's very grounding. It's a very sacred, it's like church for me. It's something I revere and honor. And I've been doing it for so much of my life that it's just a way of loving for me. Like to be able to play and have anyone else in earshot. It's like I feel like I become like a flower that's giving off a scent, or like the sun that's bringing warmth. Like it's a beautiful feeling.
This is a style of music that kind of went underground for a while. People didn't share it. They hid it within family lines. And because the Hawaiian people lost so much of their culture, their language, the hula was outlawed, the music was hidden too. How important is it for you as a performer and as part of this tradition to perpetuate and carry on?
Oh, I mean, it's always been my first kuleana or responsibility. When I was younger, I had a lot of career offers that would take me away from playing this music, and I turned every single one of them down because I felt a deep responsibility with the gift that was given to me by my kumu, my teachers. And this music really was actually never a public music. It was never intended to be performed. I mean, even hula was never performative. We have an idea of Hawaiian music today as a performance art, but it really it was no such thing, you know. And Slack Key is no exception to that. Slack Key Guitar was a very personal music that was played for just the player usually, and only because of the work of people like Gabby Pops Pahinui, Leonard Kwan, and eventually Uncle Raymond Kane did it become something for the public. But if you go back to the liner notes of the LPs of Slack Key Guitar from the 60s, when my teachers and their colleagues were putting out this music first into the public, it already refers to Slack Key as a dying art form. So, you know, I think that if I was a blues player or a different style where there are so many people interested in that art form, so many people putting love into it and sharing it, there might be a sense of less of responsibility. But because there are so few of us that have been blessed to be able to learn from these progenitors of this unique art form, it will always be like the foundation of my art.
How old were you when you started studying with Uncle Sonny Chillingworth?
Sonny and I were awarded a grant from the State Foundation on Culture and the Arts when I was 13. And I learned from him for about a year, and then he became too ill to teach.
Did you get any lessons from him besides the music when it comes to walking that line of playing Hawaiian Slack Key for oneself versus going out to the world to perform in front of people?
At that time, I only performed a few times with him at different Slack Key festivals, but I think what really affected me was just being in his presence, being in his garage, spending a lot of time with him one-on-one, and at that time in his life, his gentle, nurturing nature of sharing with me. I know that from watching, after he passed away, there are a number of film of him that surfaced where he talked about me, and he really believed that I would be able to carry on his style, and so he made that investment. And I would just say the biggest lesson, aside from the technical aspect, was the pure love for playing. That love cannot be underestimated. It's so powerful.
Talk about Uncle Sonny's style and
Sure.
how that's different and how that influences your playing today.
So, as I was saying, Uncle Raymond's style is more like it's different from Sonny's in that it tends to be I'm going to use some adjectives here, like slower, a little more grounded, repetitive. But there's no value judgment here because, I mean, playing Uncle Raymond's music is just such a joy and it's so beautiful. Sonny's music got a little more complex. He was more of a shredder, and he taught me a lot of dexterity. I mean, one of the things is with slack key guitar, so basically I'm in a very basic tuning, G tuning, and the Spanish also uses tuning, but Hawaiians call this taro patch, and this tuning is tuned to a G chord. So what that means is I don't have to use my fretting hand to hold a chord. So now I can do an alternating bass line. This is tradition. And over that, do a melody. And then play the bass and the melody at the same time. So a lot of Uncle Raymond's music, not all, does an alternating. A lot of what Sonny likes to do is like a waltz bass. And Sonny, I mean, I really don't know how to put it into words. It gets pretty complex. I mean, so it's good that I learned Raymond's style first. It was ideal. And then learning Sonny's style got a little more complicated with like little things, like Raymond might do a brush like this, and Sonny might require you to do it like this, which is a little more technical. So all of that adds up to a lot of dexterity and a lot of discipline over formative years for me that laid a foundation where when they passed away, I was able to go back into the recordings of all of the performers of Slack Key and study all the different family styles.
So talk about your creative process, because you have one foot firmly rooted in tradition, but then you're also frequently pushing the boundary of, what can you do with your guitar? Is it slack key? Is it not slack key? I think sometimes the listener is not sure.
And it doesn't matter. That's the important thing is there's a time and place to be very clear about definitions and boundaries. And that's what perpetuating something is all about, so that it doesn't get watered down and lost. But at the same time, tradition is alive. And if you only treat it like a relic, you actively destroy it. I think a lot of people fail to see that in learning traditional arts. You have something called a purist, which I never agree with purists, because purists take a photograph and try to superimpose it onto a moving thing. The reality is anything that we call tradition today at one time was new. If you look at the music of Gabi Pahinui, who is the most well-known slack key guitarist of all time, Gabi's music was deeply influenced by American big band jazz and rock and roll and R&B and blues. And he literally would lift whole phrases out of those and insert them into his Hawaiian songs in his intros and outros. And now we look at that and we call that tradition, mainly because there are so few people educated on this style. So they just kind of go, oh, it's from that time, so it must be traditional. So for me, in creating, I don't get caught up in those thoughts. I just do one thing my whole career in life in music is I keep going back in time and forward in time at the same time at all times.
With technology today and with the internet, with YouTube, like I can watch a video from my home in New Jersey and learn a Slack Key song. Can someone on the other side of the earth, can they learn and play Slack Key without having ever stepped foot in Hawaii?
Yeah, they can, but think of it like this. Let me rephrase your question. Can someone learn a language from another culture, never having gone there, in those places that speak that language as their first language? Yes, of course. But any native speaker will be able to tell the difference. And that's the thing about Slack Key is like I have students all over the world, and we do our best to teach through the technology mediums that we have, and it can enrich people's lives and give them a lot. But I think that it's also there's more to perpetuating a cultural art form than just the technical. There's a lot more. It's a huge conversation around that.
For those who don't know your music, you've gotten a lot of attention. I know that you competed in a guitar player magazine, like showcase. Was it Guitar Player?
It was.
And you had a song go viral and you had appearances on CNN. Talk about, as an artist, like trying to get attention and I guess more exposure to your music and what you're creating. And are those things profitable? Like if suddenly a song goes viral, and maybe you can give some context about how that happened, does that flow down to the bottom line as a musician or does it not?
Okay, and also add to that, I would say, first of all, that, I mean, if you want to make money, don't set out to be a musician. That's just the honest truth. Like our streaming rates are average 0.0004 cents per stream. It's common to get a quarterly check for like $20. You know what I mean? And like I don't, I'm not a very visible artist, but like I had 1 million streams on Spotify this year, which is very little compared to some of the bigger artists. But I mean, the money is not significant. I've had, I think about 2 years ago, Pandora, I've had 20 million total streams, and I'd made a total of like $2,000. In terms of exposure, I mean, this is something, especially for young artists, I always say, hey, you can play this gig, it's free, but you get exposure, or this or that. Of course, we have the internet now. I think that, when you're talking about to quantify how exposure translates to income, I mean, there's a few ways to look at it. Number one, if people develop some kind of emotional bond with you as an artist, then there's many ways to turn that into income. But the direct quantification and financialization of exposure is the ad revenue streaming model, which I don't participate in. Like I don't currently, and this may change, but currently I don't monetize any of my YouTube. Like if somebody uploads playing one of my songs or whatever, I don't track them down and put an ad on it. And the only reason why there's ads on my YouTube is because I haven't had time to take them down. They shouldn't be there. It's kind of a mess. Their algorithms are a little wonky sometimes. But I mean, there's that whole way of like saying, after you get so many streams, there's a computed system of like royalties for ads. That's one thing, but you have to be obsessive about that. And most artists aren't going to do that, including me so far. In terms of exposure turning into income in other ways, I mean, if you appear on a show or a performance or a video goes viral and you get fans, maybe they'll buy some merch, which I don't really sell merch. Maybe they'll come to a show But I think, to explain to the audience a little bit about how the music industry works, you have a few basic income streams. And the number one rule is you want to be nurturing numerous income streams. It's not a single income stream industry. So you have your live gigs, which of course during COVID, there was no income for that. And, live gigs sometimes can make you a lot of money. Other times can cost you money. With all of the things that go around it, whether it's marketing and promotion, production costs, travel, blah, blah, blah. So you have your live gigs. You have selling music, which today is virtually dead because first what Apple did after Napster and then with Spotify and all the streamers, people get their music for free, basically. Yeah. So there's not a lot of that. I mean, Hawaiian music tends to have fans that are older and still some of them like to purchase CDs, but that's quickly disappearing. People say, oh, well, the LP is coming back. Yes, but I mean, it's coming back. It jumped 80%. Yeah, 80% of like 0.000. So yeah, if you want to lug those around, some fans will buy them for sure. And I'm not a big thing person, but there's that income. Then you have licensing and publishing. This is where the real money is. And a lot of it has to do really with who you know and the relationships you have in terms of music placement people and all of that.
And your music did appear on the Descendants soundtrack.
It did, yes.
So you have examples
numerous other
of that.
films, yeah, and TV shows and documentaries and things. So you have that. You have subscriptions are a great way to make money. Like I run a Patreon. And it's not huge, but I generally have about 150 subscribers. It's $10 a month, and we do private, concerts just for subscribers every month. Tutorials, new music that's only released on Patreon or early access, and other kinds of things like that. Then you have sponsorships. Sometimes those are monetary or not, but they can have value. And there are a few other income streams, but I mean, and the other major one that can be really helpful is crowdsourcing, like Kickstarter. I did a Kickstarter and we raised about $70,000 for a record I was doing, working with these like legendary producers. But the bottom line is surviving and thriving in the music industry takes incredible hustling, incredible.
I read the quote that the average millionaire has 7 streams of income. When you signed up, you said it was a very natural progression to being a musician. Did you think that being a musician meant that you had to be an entrepreneur?
Oh, no, you never had the thought when you're younger. And again, I turned down major management, publishing deals, record deals, everything because I wanted to maintain artistic control. And I wasn't concerned about fame or getting rich or anything. So I took a unique path. I've never like tried to have a hit, like, cause I do cultural music and I do other things as well. But thus far, my main focus has just been artistic exploration and perpetuating traditions. But I think as I do this for longer, decades go by, and I've become an entrepreneur to the sense where like, I'll never forget my Hanai dad came up to me and he was like, I'm sitting at the computer working and it's like every day at the computer. And he goes, man, you should just hire a guitar player already and just run the business. And I couldn't, we were laughing so hard because it's so true. I was spending more time running the business than I was doing music, and finding that balance is hard because once you get to a certain level of success, I mean, I've got like 1.5 million emails in my inbox, running all your social media, your web stuff, and then you have for every gig, I mean, just playing Joe's Pub, I must have had 50 emails from the venue and my agent and everything else, and then the fans, and then so it can completely be overwhelming.
Well, I've seen that division of labor. Right? As you're very hands-on, you're very involved, you're answering emails, you're booking venues, and you're involved with that communication. I've seen, acts that scale, they have to have like a producer or somebody handling all of that for them.
Yeah, of course, scaling. And I'm one of those examples of a truly independent artist who scaled to the absolute maximum you can on your own. And it's like that small business syndrome, where it's like, okay, if we go up and hire help, the gross needs to go up, but then that means decisions, the decision tree gets shifted toward that rather than purely artistic decisions. And this is where being an artist as a professional it is, I guess I'll put it like this: it's beautiful, it's challenging, but you have to be really clear why you're doing it. And if some people, I remember Thomas Kincaid came to one of my gigs. He passed away, but he was, and probably still is, the highest grossing selling artist of all time. He'd sell like $1 billion in art every year. And he's the one, like all the puzzles, like a little fantasy with the river and the little house. And this is a guy who's purely a business guy. I mean, it's hard to even say he was an artist anymore.
Yeah, he received criticism for that
Yeah.
he was a business person and not so much an artist.
Yeah, I mean, he could farm out, and now you have AI that could just generate all that stuff in a second. But my point is, you can criticize him, but he chose to do that, and people chose to buy his stuff. I mean, I wouldn't buy his stuff, but people did, so I really don't see a point to criticize. The point is he chose it, and the market supported it, so there it is. For what I want to do in the world, I'm not concerned about that. My concern is both experiencing the magic of creating art from a place that isn't driven by capital, and also observing how that art interacts with humans. I mean, this is what fascinates and drives me. And I'm blessed where I have a niche. I'm not just a singer-songwriter in millions of singer-songwriters. I have a niche where I do a specific cultural practice. I'm a master at that, and that keeps me in a kind of a place in the marketplace where it's like, okay, I'm one of those people that even when I'm 80, I'll still be that. So that also gives me the wherewithal to go launch and do all these other crazy things that I like to do.
So share with us a little bit, because you're going to be performing at Joe's Pub here in New York. You're going to be going down to Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. These are relatively intimate, but very well-respected venues. You've done some national tours, too. Like years ago, I saw you opening up for Jason Mraz here in New York at Beacon Theater. That was insane. I never heard so many like teenage girls screaming before.
Yeah.
I think my brother and I were the only guys in the whole theater. And then I saw you a few years ago at Jones Beach. You were touring with Joe Walsh. Like that's a much bigger stage, right?
Very.
What's that like as a performer?
Oh, I mean, as a performer, I love it. I mean, you can put me in front of 1 million people. It's all the same to me. What I do might change, but I enjoy it all. When you're doing support opening, it's different. You're playing for their audience. And so you have to be sensitive to that. But you still have an opportunity to turn on people to what you do. And I've done a lot of that kind of work, and I love it. But in terms, if you remove like all of everything else, the economics and the career and all that stuff, and you just talk about the vibe of being on stage, they both offer a lot. I mean, I was doing Red Rocks opening for Joe Walsh and Bad Company, and like playing, going to California from Led Zeppelin in my style at Red Rock. I mean, it was like one of those moments like, this is awesome. This is really fun. And everyone's singing along, and it was cool. But I mean, playing a small venue like Joe's Pub, I mean, when I play, I close my eyes and I'm just so focused on channeling. Like, it doesn't matter if there's one human being or hundreds or thousands. It's, of course, the room can feel different, but honestly, I believe music is best conveyed with smaller audiences. Once you start to scale up, it becomes a scene. And there's all these other energy dynamics and sound problems and things. I mean, really, it becomes a scene with all sorts of distractions, the mob and all these things. And so I do really love quiet, intimate shows. I mean, that's for an art form like what we do. I'm not AC/DC. Like, it's really nice.
So what do you want to, like, does part of you strive to get back to Red Rocks?
Yeah, I mean, so what's been tricky for me in my career is I have so much my scope of focus is so broad. Yeah, like, and with Hawaiian music and Slack Key, I mean, I could just do this forever, and I will, but it's not enough for me as an artist. Like, there's so much more. I do philosophy. I have written at least 500 songs, not in the Hawaiian genre. And so there's all this other music. I'm sitting on hundreds of songs I haven't released yet. And because the Makana Hawaiian career is so demanding, it takes a lot for me to like say, okay, I need to say no for the next few months and focus on this. So in terms of what I'm about to do over the next year or two, I'm wrapping up this musical that I've been working on for a very long time that I'd like to eventually take to Broadway, and would probably consider first releasing as an episodic audio-only podcast. So, and bringing in actors and singers and producing the whole thing from an audio perspective, and then building that through that, and then eventually bringing it to stage. And then I'm also working on a number of other records of original music that totally do not even sound anything like what I do. So right now, the tricky part is the time and the focus. So many good things happening with the Makana career that it's like, God, I can't. Like, I was done touring, and then they're like, "Oh, Kennedy Center wants you to come play." I was like, "What? Oh, okay, I can't say no to that." So it's like that constant kind of thing.
How do these different things come up? Like Kennedy Center or, Joe Walsh, Bad Company. How do those things happen?
Oh my God, it's so random. Like Joe Walsh, like my friend Chris was managing Paul Rogers for a long time. And when Paul and Bad Company and Joe got together and said, let's do this tour through Live Nation, Chris was handling a lot of the logistics for everything. And I knew Chris from previous interactions, and I had opened for Paul years ago in Washington, and he was like, "Hey man, are you free like for this summer, blah blah blah?" And I was like, "Why? What's going on?" And he's like, "You want to open like big arenas for Joe Walsh by yourself?" I was like, "Sure." I mean, it's always random. The Jason Mraz gig, which I toured opening 26 cities for him, came when he was doing a private yoga class with my friend Denise Kaufman, and she was playing my album while they were meditating, and there were some like X-rated lyrics that came on, and he started laughing, and he's like, "I gotta have this guy on my tour."
All right, maybe not the X-rated lyrics, but play a song from that period of your life. Was that from your first album, the Makana album?
I don't. No, that was probably from Koyao. I mean, there's God. Actually, this is kind of strange, but well, first of all, as you know, both my parents passed away recently, and for some reason, prior to that all happening, and especially more so since that they've passed, I've been writing a lot about death. And it sounds dark, but actually death is like something I've realized, like, modern culture has no relationship to death. It's just weird. It's like, oh, death. But like all the ancient cultures, death was part. There was like a relationship to it. It wasn't some like scary thing that was like you don't talk about. And so when people deal with death, they need tools. And I have a lot of friends who work with hospice in Hawaii. In fact, one of my friends who passed away, Reverend Mitsuo Aoki, was one of the founding members. And I scored a film all about terminal cancer patients. And so this is something that really I'm passionate about. So I'm actually over time creating a body of work that I'm going to release as an album over the next few years about death and dying. And so I'll just play you a verse or two from this one. This is very Shakespearean. It's called The Undressing Room. You know, like how in a show you have the dressing room? So this is the undressing room. You can't see me now. Behind the curtain, after the bow. No sound nor light here to reveal my soul undressing, head to heel. Though my performance ended suddenly, the role I played was acted perfectly. For all the world's a stage, and now my scene is through.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, death is definitely part of the human experience, and everybody deals with it differently. I guess if you're ancient Egypt, you'd erect pyramids for the afterlife. But yeah, everybody has to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like bringing us back to like the focus of your show, this whole idea of, I mean, as you know, the majority of wealth transfer in the United States happens through inheritance. And, you know, like I'm not somebody who has kids. I don't really intend to have kids. I very much look at the world as my family, in the sense that I am sensitive to the scientific fact that we are part of an ecosystem, that we are interdependent not only on the ecosystem provided by nature, but the ecosystem created by humans. The roads, the pipes, the toilets and showers, this, you know, all of this technology that we share. And so I think that death really plays a role in how people look at wealth, because we live in a society that doesn't give you any sort of solid safety net, really. And it's constantly being torn at, you know, and we don't really have a floor and we don't really have a ceiling, and we kind of just have this chaotic competition. And so if we could collectively kind of change our relationship to death, it might change the way that we look at wealth. And what I mean is that this idea that we have to save as much as possible, more than we need, and everybody has needs, but more than we need, and then give that to our children so that they have an edge up. And you have to ask yourself, if most of the wealth is moving through the same bloodlines and through this inheritance system, which means that same lines get more access to education, more access to better jobs, more access to better living conditions, blah, 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 then how is that creating a more equitable society? And, you know, like, I mean, is it really helpful to a kid to give a kid a leg up like that? I mean, you know, it's questionable. So these are the kind of things that interest me, these kind of philosophical ideas and questioning, because I look at so many of my friends who are, in a way, obsessed with this gaining of wealth and not doing what they love, not finding bigger meaning in the world. And I think that the youngest generation is starting to really question that, because things are so bad for them. They're just like, do we really want to get invested in this?
Yeah, especially post-pandemic. I mean, there are so many young people leaving their jobs. And they say, I need money, but this, like, life has to be more than this work that I'm going to every day.
Yeah, and it's not that. First of all, I want to say there's nothing evil about being lazy. And I don't have a lazy bone in my body. I'm a workaholic. But I think that the way that we criminalize laziness, like it's equal to like rape and murder or something, is crazy. Like, what's wrong with just sitting around? Like, when did that become a crime? And I just think that we're going to start seeing a whole different attitude and approach to not only accumulation of wealth, but definition of wealth.
Share your thoughts on impact in how it is that you think about your work and what you're creating. Because you were saying that you're trying to think like in terms of a very long period of time.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier that I try to create art as though I've been dead for 50 years. You know, so like that means like not caring at all about people's reactions, not trying to second guess what people are going to like. Bowie always warned against that. Don't ever try to guess what your audience is going to like. That's a good way to fail. But also moving beyond this idea of leaving a legacy. I mean, this whole fantasy that we want to be remembered and celebrated when we die is pure narcissism. I mean, that's just what it is. When you die, I don't think you care at all, if there is a you. And so this idea of using art in order to facilitate an environment that supports humans being human rather than just cogs in a machine of wealth redistribution. That's what I try to do. And, you know, with the Hawaiian music, I do a lot of education. And I know it's very healing for people because it's a soothing kind of music and they have certain associations with Hawaii and stuff. And I think that is very valuable. I'm honored to do it. But I have broader visions that I like to do. I mean, you know, I wrote a song that Rolling Stone magazine referred to as the anthem for Occupy Wall Street. Which I didn't write as the anthem. I just wrote it for how I felt, but it got adopted by a lot of people. And I think that music needs to return to its position in voicing the fringe rather than the mainstream. I mean, if you look at like, you know, everything that became popular was at one time the fringe, and then mainstream grabbed it and oh, we can make money. Even punk is a good example. Punk was total fringe. And then the corporations were like, there's money here. So suddenly punk was cool, you know, and then came the 90s, right? And so the job of the artist in terms of contributing to society is to really operate on the fringe. And we've completely lost track of this because we're all about numbers and quantification and who can sell the most tickets and this and that. But so many artists you never hear of. So many artists can't sell tickets. People won't come to see them, but they're just incredible. They're just absolutely masters at what they do. I mean, I went to go see Mayumi Oda's exhibit at Tibet House, she was at my show on the Big Island of Hawaii the other day. She's 80-something years old, incredible artist. And there was no one in there. I mean, there's no big hoopla about her exhibit. It's in some little place that very few people will see, but I'm looking at this art just with tears in my eyes going, this is very important art. You know, what she's doing, it's very unique and powerful. And so I think that this is leading me to what I really would like to see, which you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is the arts at some point need to be subsidized. They need to be socialized, because if we don't start really, truly being serious about the power of art in society, we're going to lose artists. And you saw already and are seeing this from the pandemic.
Well, it's interesting because it was a government program that subsidized you learning from Uncle Sonny Chillingworth.
100%.
And it's kind of interesting to see how technology plays a role too, because Patreon, the whole idea is that's not a government subsidy, nope, but you're able to find patrons who are supporting your art.
And as you recall, before we were born in the medieval times and coming up through the centuries, Patronage was the only way artists survived, and that's where all our operas came from and everything else. So if we go and, the upper crust goes and celebrates the opera, and, of course, a lot of them do support the arts, but I think the attitude is very pro-capitalist, anti-socialist. And the reality is, in America, I mean, there would be no middle class and there would certainly be no artists if we didn't have social programs. So this idea of artists having to constantly compete to earn a living, I mean, I'm blessed because I became an entrepreneur. I totally understand this industry. I'm also Chinese. I'm really good with money. I mean, that's just how it is, man. Like, it's in my blood. And it's like, for me, it's that part of my mind's always going like, okay, how does this fit into the income structure? Does this, okay, this is going to cost money, but it's worth it. Okay, it's part of the bigger vision and this and that. And I don't ignore that, but I don't let that be the CEO. It's like one of the board members and saying, oh, okay, well, maybe you should turn down that gig because blah, blah, blah. Or no, you need to do that one because of this or that. And then, okay, but my bigger vision is this. Thank you very much. So, but the point is, most artists don't operate from that, and so we need infrastructure to make sure that our culture is alive.
Makana, you're very thoughtful. I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
Well, first of all, I define it for me in terms of my health. Always number one. Not only is my body an instrument, but I hate feeling crappy. I just can't tolerate it. So my health is my success. The second is am I a positive force in other people's lives? And when I can have 1 to however many interactions a day where I feel like I'm a positive force in someone's life, that makes me feel successful. Today, right before we started filming, some person from some country, I don't even know who they are or what, they were like, I can't find this song. I really blah, blah, blah. And I just gave them a free download of it. Like, and they're so happy. Like, no, I didn't. It wasn't transactional. So for me, success is this being a decent person and being able to feel good in my body and to be able to have the liberty to make choices in manifesting my artistic vision. That's success. And of course it can scale. I have broader dreams, but in my dreams, I always have levels of dreams because the big dreams are like ridiculously big and you could get depressed if they take too long, which they do take maybe 100 years. So I have all these mid-level success stories in my head, and I make sure that I set them to a place where I have enough of that chemical dump of like, yes, did that, that I can move to the next bigger one. So I'm not going to articulate that because they change all the time. But one thing I never do is compare myself. And I always tell people this, my secret power in the world is I don't want what everyone wants. And that makes me incredibly wealthy.
What is it that you want?
I want to use my art to incite a revolution of perception and to change the way we see economics and to change the way we see happiness. And so that's a big vision. And what I don't want is a white picket fence and a house and a mortgage and that's not in me. And so because I'm not driven by materialism, and materialism is part of our existence. It's necessarily part of our existence, but then there's over materialism. And I've had my experiences with that, going on shopping sprees and clothes and this and that. And I'm at a place now in my life where it's like, what's going on inside is so much more rewarding for me. The thought process, the creative process, imagination, like the potential of art to move people, like that power of like an idea, how it can just boom, how a song can just completely shatter someone or bring them to life. These are magical powers. And so using that as my currency, rather than this idea that I just need to play the game like everyone else and invest and save and put it into this and let that, build. And I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in that. So that's what I mean by my secret power is when you don't have the same goal that everyone else has, you're not subject to the same rules. That is wiggle room for you to do some kind of magic.
Yeah. In many respects, you have a level of freedom that others may not have.
I do. And I take that freedom seriously. And I would say the number one trait that makes me successful is my discipline. I've always believed that discipline is the path to joy. I get up every day, I fast, I train my body. I do still to this day, even at my level of success, I do lessons and tutorials for me, not only giving, but receiving, training vocals, practicing guitar, learning languages, doing all of these things to constantly build my ability spectrum. And that for me is like the greatest feeling. I just love that. So doing all of this so that I don't become a parody of myself and just constantly repeat. And you come to the show and it's like you're seeing Hi'ilawe for the 200th time. It's like that doesn't happen with me. And I will never let that happen, because at that point, the art becomes just a business. And I think that there's this beautiful thing called pono in the Hawaiian language. And a lot of time pono is translated as righteousness. But I think that's like of a religious Western overlay. I believe that pono really is about right relationship balance. And so there's this balance of like, okay, we all need a little comfort. We have our jackets. We don't want to freeze outside. I might even have gloves, and we have blankets and we have heating and we have these things that keep the elements from damaging our bodies. And then we have pleasures. We have our iPad and our iPhone and our guitar and things. But there's a certain point when that pursuit of the material starts to encroach on this beautiful space where you can create abundance through perception, through ideas. And that's, I think, what makes humans so amazing is our ideas, our abstract thought capabilities. And so that's what I'm saying is that pono balance of like, okay, I have just enough, I carry just enough, I'm like a nomad. And then how can I be in a place, connect with people, lift people, give back to people, learn from people, and have a social exchange that is like healthy and balanced, and then move on to the next place. And that is a different kind of life. And that's the life that I lead.
Well, keep the magic going. Thank you for sharing your music and your stories and your thoughts with us. Tell the Inspired Money listeners and viewers where they can follow you and find out more.
Sure. makanamusic.com. That's MAKANA music.com. And all my social links are on there. Everything's pretty much at Makana Music. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Makana.
Mahalo. Thanks, Andy.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I love talking music and creativity with Makana. Did you enjoy having guitar performances in the episode? If so, let me know. My favorite thing was Makana saying that his superpower is not wanting what everybody else wants. That makes him wealthy. It's a real contrarian view on personal finances. Think about that. Take a moment to think about what fills your cup, what brings you joy. And you know what I mean. If money can be secondary, what brings you true fulfillment? Isn't that something worth chasing? If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, please post a comment or share it in the Inspired Moneymakers Facebook group at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. Thank you for tuning in to the end. Be sure to subscribe to my email that goes out every 2 weeks. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/newsletter. It's free and informative. Thank you for joining me on this mission. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.